Hello, test 1, 2, 3.
Hello, we can hear you.
Test.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I talked to her for a second. I'm getting rusty already. I wish she answered that. Hey, Rob, how are you? How are you?
Good evening. We'll commence this hearing. This is the regularly scheduled meeting of the Caldwell Hearing Examiner for March 8, 2022. I serve in both a decision-making capacity and an advisory capacity to the mayor and city council. There are two types of public hearings that this commission conducts. The first is a legislative hearing whereby we formulate recommendations on certain land use requests. My recommendations are then forwarded on to the city council, who makes a decision on legislative matters. The second type of public hearing is quasi-judicial in nature, meaning that the requests are specific to a parcel of land. I am authorized to make decisions on requests for special use permits, variances, preliminary plat, time extensions, and planned unit developments that do not involve the subdivision of land. However, any decision I may make tonight is by no means final. Anyone that believes he or she has been aggrieved by my decision has a right to file an appeal to the city council. On quasi-judicial requests that involve the subdivision of land, rezones, and annexation, I'm authorized to only make recommendations to the city council who will make the decision. The hearing procedures as required by the Idaho Code are as follows. Staff will first present a report on the application. The applicant or the applicant's representative will then present the summary of the request. Testimony of those in support will be taken, followed by testimony from those in neutral position, followed by those in opposition. Item 4, I will allow the applicant or applicant's representative rebuttal. 5, after the rebuttal testimony is given, public testimony is closed and no new oral or written testimony will be allowed unless I elect to reopen testimony. The time limits for testimony are as follows. The applicant will receive 10 minutes. Those in favor, those neutral, opposed, and rebuttal will all be allowed 5 minutes of testimony. I accept oral and written testimony from those in attendance, but only if you sign the sign-up sheet to speak and have been sworn in. When testifying before me, you must come to the podium, state your full name and address, and acknowledge that you've been sworn in. I ask everyone to treat all parties with fairness and respect. I will not tolerate any outbursts, etc. I also ask that those in attendance please turn off your cell phones. I'm a volunteer hearing examiner and receive a small compensation for my efforts. I am charged by law to keep a clear record of the proceedings, consider factual testimony, and to stay within the city's and state's rules and regulations. We, the city staff, thank you for your courtesy to us and to others as we move through the process. And with that, I'd like those who wish to testify tonight to stand and be sworn in. Thank you.
Raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you shall give in this matter shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, and yes.
I do.
Thank you, Mr. Duncan. And thank you all very much. I would like to rearrange the hearing schedule, the action item 2, old business 1, case number SUP 2109. I'd like to make the second item, and I'd like to make the first item case number SUP 2114. And just for the reason that the second case seems to be less involved and with fewer people wanting to testify for that. So, having said that, we will open the hearing on action item 1, new business, item 3, case number SUP 2114, and I would like to request the staff to make a presentation, please.
Emma Hill, Associate Planner, 621 Cleveland Boulevard, and I have been sworn in. So the application in front of you is for SUP 214014. They are seeking a special use permit
Speak a little bit closer to the mic, please.
They are seeking a special use permit for the Palace Event Center located at 815 Arthur Street, parcel number R045805 after that. It is located in the city center district and zoned as so. The intent is to provide more space for the event hosting service to provide private businesses and community events such as banquets, forums, high school dances, fundraisers, family reunions, holiday parties, weddings, and quinceañeras. The tenant is proposing obtaining a liquor license. Until then, once they have applied and obtained that, alcohol can be served at the event, but it will be the responsibility of the caterers. The applicant was approved for a special use permit in April of 2021. The previous special use permit was approved for the same uses. However, it was only for the ballroom on the second floor. This special use permit is for the rest of the ballroom on the second floor, or the space on the second floor, as well as the third floor above. So, in the, not the site plan, the other photo, the, rest of the space on the second floor is, going to be used for the special use permit, and then as well as the third floor. Yeah.
And that's your testimony. Just a clarification, the third floor is essentially a mezzanine, to the second floor.
It is, closed off. There are doors to it. There's a small, balcony, but, when we visited, this was closed off. So I assume that during an event, it would be closed off just for safety.
And, a question about, has the applicant indicated that any kind of soundproofing, to reduce, say, band noises, anything like that?
From what I have read, no, there will be no construction or added anything like that.
And, just to be clear, this is a private entity making an application, and, the use is covered here. They talk about the sound impinging on the neighbors, that the operation curtail at 1 a.m. And then that's one of the conditions of approval.
Yes.
And the parking on this, I'm assuming there's enough downtown parking, particularly after hours, to meet the intent of the code.
Yes, there is.
Okay, there's no additional parking or anything as part of this application?
There is not, and there's, no parking in alleys if that was to be proposed, but it's not.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate your testimony. With that, I would like to request the applicant to make their presentation, please.
Okay, good evening. I am Patrick McKeegan. I'm the architect representing Palace Event Center on this item. And as was stated, we originally came in for the use permit for the main space, and yes.
Would you please state your name and address, and if you've been sworn in, please?
Okay. Patrick McKeegan, address is 2419 South Annette Street, Boise, Idaho, 83705.
Thank you. Go ahead, please. Start over.
Okay. Last year, we came in for a use permit for the main floor, and at the time, I did not catch that it didn't include the rest of the space, so I apologize for the redundancy. But in the past year, the client has found that he's getting a large need for smaller type of venues, which if you put it in the large space, they seem lost. You know, think of a small birthday party, small business meeting, something like that. So, the use that was on the third floor has moved out, so he asked the building owner if he could take over that space, and so as well the remainder of the second floor. So that's what this application is for. Really, than that, since the application before, we finished the ADA restrooms, so there's accessible restrooms available to everybody. The parking meets the city's requirements. We've presented information previously that showed the public parking count in the city, and we exceed the requirement for the space. So, other than that, unless there's some questions, I think it's a pretty straightforward application, and ask you give us your approval.
Thank you, sir. I do have one question in regards to the previous application. Are these two applications similar in nature? Are there anything different with this one that is was granted in the first one?
I can honestly state that I literally went into the old application and provided the same exhibits, except I obviously had different graphics showing the area, but all of the other information was exactly the same. I just changed some verbiage in the information, so we haven't made any significant changes haven't made any changes except for denoting the new area for the application.
And, well, this is an obvious question, but, is this, the same ownership of the whole building?
No, the building is owned by, Miguel Gaddy. I don't know what entity he's operating this under, but he is leasing it to, a gentleman that runs the Palace Event Center.
Okay, thank you. That, the permit resides with the structure, the use resides with the structure, just, you know, regardless of the one who is conducting the business.
Okay,
But,
that's good to know.
That's, it seems pretty clear. I have no further questions. With that, I would like to, open the floor. I don't have anybody signed yet. Is there anyone here wishing to testify to this application? Thank you very much. And, with that, if you have any testimony at all, if you time for rebuttal, but, you're it, so, I think with that, I will close the hearing and, go to the analysis portion, or close the testimony, and go to the analysis portion of the hearing.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. In the matter of SUP 21-14, an application for the special use permit for the second and third floors in the Palace Event Center, have the findings as follows. The Caldwell hearing examiner accepts the comprehensive plan components listed below, page 3 of 6 in the staff report. And I agree with the goals and policies cited in the staff report. In section 6, again on page 3, findings of fact, the Caldwell hearing examiner accepts facts outlined in the staff report, public testimony, and the evidence list. All adopted city ordinances, standards, and codes were used in evaluating the application. Proposed use is conditionally permitted by the terms of ordinance and is subject to conditions of approval. The conclusions of law, the Caldwell hearing examiner has the authority to hear the case, whether it be approved or denied. The public notice requirements were met, and the hearing was conducted within the guidelines of applicable Idaho code and city ordinances. Section 8 for the order of decision. Based on the findings of facts and conclusions of law, the hearing examiner hereby orders that case number SUP 21-14, request by the Palace Event Center property owner for special use permit for an expansion of the Palace Event Center on parcel R04763 and 50 in Caldwell, Idaho, in a city center zone is approved with the following conditions of approval. And on page 4 of the staff report, there are conditions 8.2 to 8.10. And those conditions shall apply to this special use permit, and with no additions. And with that, I conclude this hearing. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
The next item on the agenda, moving right along, case number SUP 21, project Madison Estate multifamily development, Madison Estates lot 119 and 24, and part of lot 20, block 1, is amended by the proposed lot line adjustment, case file LLA 21-6 for 3.6 acres on lot R0, 308-7200. And with that, I would like to ask the staff to meet their staff for a presentation, please.
Thank you, Mr. Hearing Examiner. Debbie Ruth, 21 Cleveland Boulevard, and I have been sworn.
Thank you.
The case before you tonight is a request for a special use permit on an existing platted development, Madison Estate. The current existing development is 20 lots plus one strip of a lot, and they have applied for a lot line adjustment to create, to reduce the number of lots, increasing the lot sizes to 15 buildable lots within this proposed development. The current property is zoned medium density residential. Duplexes would be allowed on the lot, permitted on the lots as they exist today, but the applicant has determined that he has applied for the ability to build multifamily units, fourplex units on this property. He's proposing 15 multifamily units with a total of 60 units on this 3.5 acres of property, Madison Estate. The property is surrounded on 4 sides by single-family residential that's zoned medium-density residential as well. These are all older established residential homes that are low-roofed, single-family residential, and been in the area for a long time. This property is also adjacent to the Caldwell City Streets Department in that southeast corner, which that property is zoned M1 light industrial.
Southwest.
The property is also located almost wholly in an AE floodplain management area, and will require significant engineering and elevation of a minimum of 1 foot above base flood elevation for every structure, including all electrical, appliances, air conditioning. All of those units must be elevated as well to meet the floodplain development code. Let's see here. The access management plan adopted by the city and has changed since this was a platted development, and there's no longer individual lot access to Madison Road, a collector roadway through that management plan. The applicant has opted, at the request of the city, to indicate that the roadway, which will be internal circulation, or is proposed to be internal circulation, will be in the bisecting the center of the property as requested by our engineering department to meet the access management plan for the property. Also, the applicant had indicated that he would not be taking access to Nogales Court as a result of discussions with the neighborhood at the neighborhood meeting. The multifamily development requirements are that the lot size for a fourplex unit in the R2 zone requires a minimum of 11,000 square feet for interior lots and 12,500 square feet for corner lots. And that's a calculation that's in the dimension table notes in the zoning ordinance. The open space required for multifamily development is a minimum of 10% qualifying open space. qualifying open space does not include the street landscape buffers and, any drainage space that may be seepage beds or anything, drainage ponds that would be in the open landscaping. The parking requires 1.5 paid spaces required per unit, or 90 parking stalls are required on site. I indicated that a parking plan was not provided for this particular development. I did find a parking plan when the developer was requesting 17 lots, but I did not find a 15 lot one, although it seems to have included that in his presentation packet that has been provided. So, and there are over 90 spaces provided on that. The bicycle parking is required also for this multifamily development at 1 space per every 2 units, so at least 30 bicycle parking spaces in accordance with the requirements of the bicycle parking standards in the pedestrian amenities portion of the ordinance in the parking section. Landscape buffers that are required for this development, East Madison and North First Avenue are collector roadways and require 15-foot landscape buffer. North 3rd Street and Nogales Court are local streets and require 10-foot landscape buffer. And any right-of-way that is not developed with sidewalk, curb or gutter must also be landscaped by the developer. The merits of this application are that it is located near the interstate and collector roadways within 1.5 miles of services, including fire, schools, and restaurants. It could be considered infill and should be encouraged in the city center area, and the underlying comprehensive plan designation for this area is traditional neighborhood, although majority of the property is already zoned medium density. The traditional neighborhood area is encouraging infill, mixed use, and sometimes redevelopment of areas that are considered blight or have some aesthetic issues and things where the development could be some homes being removed and replaced with newer or more efficient structures. The challenges of this plan is that it's located in a primarily low-roof, single-family residential neighborhood. The plan lacks detail, including open space, parking, landscaping, and the lots are not sufficient in size to meet the code requirements. The area is located in an AE flood zone, which provides some challenges to meet that code, although it just takes engineering and fill typically, but we will have to meet all the requirements of the code for flood. With that, staff will stand for questions.
Thank you, Ms. Root. I do have a few at this time, and then we'll have address more questions after the testimony. But with the floodplain, I didn't see a floodplain map. Is the entire parcel in the AE zone of the floodplain? Oh, that is the...
So the majority of the parcel is in the AE floodplain. The 2 existing multifamily units that are not a part of this application are out of the flood area primarily, and then just a portion right there in the center. But the majority of it is in the mapped floodplain, and this is the 2019 updated map.
Thank you. The other question, I'm going to focus on the road or the easement, as the case may be, with the question to you and to the applicant, the, road standard or driveway, what are we calling this? Are we calling it internal circulation?
Yeah, this roadway has to comply with the internal circulation standard. It won't meet a common driveway. They're not proposing it to be a public street, and therefore their only option is to have it be internal circulation in the multifamily article, Article 14 of the code.
Okay, and the required width in Article 14 is 26 feet.
26 feet, yes.
And, my understanding is that, the northern couple of lots on that, don't meet that 26 foot, according to their drawing.
Again, the drawing, and I provided that to you, so we need to, note that as an added late exhibit on, that shows First Avenue and Nogales Court on the corner.
Yeah, I have it.
It indicates that the driveway width or the road width there are 12 feet on each side, so that's 24 feet. It is also noted that he's showing parking spaces that are significantly longer than what's required by the code, so there would be potentially room for a 26-foot wide roadway there, but that's not what's depicted on this detail A8 in this drawing.
Thank you, Ms. Ruth. For the record, I'd like to take your concern. We have 3 exhibits that have been submitted this evening. I'd like to enter those into the record from Ramsey Bouperos. We have a letter here, and I'll label that as Exhibit SUP 21-9-1. The applicant, Bulldog Investments, submitted an exhibit which I shall designate as SUP 21-9-2. The drawing that Ms. Ruth just referred to shall label as Exhibit SUP 21-9-3. And just for clarification, I'll take the liberty of designating your presentation slideshow as Exhibit SUP 21-9-4, just for the record. So, Ms. Ruth, the other question I have, and we'll have a more detailed discussion of this, is the lot size. The requirements, as noted in your staff report, are listed for single-family, duplex, triplex, threeplex, fourplex, and total requirements out of section 1002-03.1. In my review of the plans, I didn't see any of these proposed lots meeting the standard for a fourplex, which would be 12,000 square feet minimum lot size.
11,000 square feet for the
11,000,
interior lots and 12,500 for the corner lots.
Right, okay, I stand corrected. So it was not clear to me from the drawings submitted in the staff report that these lots meet that standard. Is that your evaluation?
That is my evaluation.
Thank you. I did a calculation, given the proposed lot line adjustment map, and it looked like these smaller lots were coming in at just barely over 10,000 square feet, which would perhaps allow for a triplex. Is that your assessment?
That is correct as they stand, yes.
The corner lots, I didn't have, well, I guess I didn't have the time to try to calculate the dimensionality there, but, I'm guessing that they are not 12,500 square feet or larger.
They were not.
Thank you very much. And the overall reaction to my examining this case is that there are a lot of things missing or could be more complete. And you noted some of those in your presentation. A lack of a parking plan that may have been submitted in this exhibit. Number two, no details on the floodplain, open spaces not shown, landscaping, there was not a site-wide landscaping plan. Is this correct, that
That is
these
correct.
features that are typically submitted in an application of this type were not submitted or not clear to the overall site?
That is correct.
Thank you very much. The primary concern I have here is the lot size. And the parcel is taking the roadway out of the center of it, further constricts the buildability of those lot sizes. Even though I understand the city has allowed these kinds of accesses in other developments, it still seems to even further limit the potential for a fourplex or even a triplex, for that matter, when all the other requirements are reduced. Is it your impression in this route that there's more clarification needed to really evaluate this application?
Well, whether it's conditioned to, meet those requirements, or whether we, continue this case and bring back, have the applicant submit, documents that comply with the requirements of the code for a landscape plan, for a parking plan, with lot sizes that are commensurate with the requirements of the code. That is up to the hearing examiner, at this point. There's been a number of plans provided to staff over this period of time that we've been in discussion on the various, application, submittals for this. Currently, I do not have in my possession a full landscape plan. I do not have lots that comply with the code or an application that requests, say, a variance and providing for any type of hardship for that, would be, onerous upon the applicant to do that. The requirements of the code, again, are clear as far as the lot sizes, and they're that way to provide for open space buildability. I believe that it provides for room for that road to be a part of the lot as well, and we have had the roadways in a number of other developments, be subject to easements and be part of those lots, but the application as it stands today lacks some detail, yes.
Thank you, Mr. Root. Bring up the easements, is this part of an application typically that there'll be at least a draft easement available to describe this internal circulation? Or does that come later?
It can be conditioned, it should be shown on the plan, which he does show that, although again, the detail of this plan is, lacking dimensional call-outs and things, and so, you know, it was our understanding that the hashed areas are what would be a common easement and shared easement, but I have no documents indicating or stating or defining that area.
Thank you, Mr. Root. Now, you stated in testimony that the requirement for internal circulation is a 26-foot wide roadway, driveway, whatever we define that.
Yeah, driveway.
And we have not, the applicant hasn't met that, even though it is potentially possible. Have you heard from the fire department, or has the applicant had that discussion with the fire department?
I've not in a while had a specific conversation with the fire department on this particular development.
Okay, thank you. I have a lot of questions. Let's see. And have you discussed or that you've seen anything that would indicate the required 10% open space? I presume that's around 0.36 acres required for that.
I've not been provided a document that shows me that they are meeting that common open space requirement. I do see in his submittal, in the submittal of the applicant, that they have provided a document that indicates some common open space.
Thank you. And then the application has the prior permits issued by the city of Caldwell, particularly for a similar residential development to this. My understanding is that these have expired and they're no longer a valid land use permission according to code.
That is accurate. Those applications have expired and are not relevant to this permit.
And thank you. The process of achieving a lot line adjustment to take the original plat, is that a prerequisite, or is that something that would come post-decision with this case tonight?
So the applicant has submitted a lot line adjustment application, and the staff has requested him to provide legal descriptions for those lots. Then as we were reviewing the lots, they aren't compliant with code. In that lot line adjustment, he asked for the application of footnote 7 under the dimensional standard. Our discussion with the city attorney was that footnote is not relevant to this application, and that we're not discussing a final plat, we're discussing a special use permit. And so footnote 7, a reduction by 10% of each of the lots, is not applicable to this case.
So it brings up an interesting question about the legal description of the lots. Is it your opinion that we have to have a completed and adopted lot line adjustment in hand to properly evaluate this application?
I think that staff did not require them to complete the application for the lot line adjustment. We did not complete the lot line adjustment because there's a discrepancy on their part and ours as to whether or not the lot size can be 11,000 square feet or 10,000 square feet. And so it's somewhat of a disservice to the applicant to make them do legal descriptions for each of those lots, record them with the county, which they would have had to record the deeds and provide those recorded deeds back to the county or to the city in order to complete that lot line adjustment.
It appears to be somewhat of a chicken and egg sort of question. And then, okay, the question I have to follow up is, the condition of approval would be adequate to address that issue, that the lot line adjustments accurately reflect the approved site plan?
Correct.
Okay, we can't have any discrepancy between the two, to at least my way of thinking, to have a proper public record in making an evaluation decision. So, and I don't know if we're, if we really have a clear plan here, so it'd be kind of difficult to have a lot line adjustment to reflect that. Do you have any information about, has there been flooding in this area, in recent history?
Again, this map layer is a result of the 2019 floodplain map revisions, which was a result of the 27, all the flooding that occurred in 2017. And so all of that was mapped. This area subs up and floods, yes.
Okay, thank you very much. That concludes our questions for now. We will get further questions after the testimony, and with that, I would thank you very much and request the applicant to make their presentation, please.
Good evening, Mr. Hearing Examiner. My name is Louis Spiker. Good evening, Mr. Hearing Examiner. My name is Louis Spiker. I'm with Johnson May. My address is 199 North Capitol Boulevard, Suite 200, Boise, Idaho. And I have been sworn in.
Thank you very much. Go ahead, please.
Well, we agree with, in large part, with the staff report that was prepared. In particular, that with regard to the goals of the comprehensive plan that this development or that this special use permit would meet. But there are a number of items which we disagree with, and I think your questions called this out in particular. In particular, with regard to the minimum lot size, when you look at what footnote 7 to section 10-02-03 of the Caldwell City Code provides, it doesn't specify that only applies with regard to a final plat application. It states that residential lots that are part of a final plat. This is a situation where we're not seeking a rezone. This is already entitled to an R2 zoning. We're not seeking a subdivision application. What we're seeking is the special use permit to allow for flex development on 15 lots. What Mr. Adams has shown you on the boards that are present are what this development will look like. And I think that's important because part of what the comprehensive plan addresses is this transition or the buffer between the different uses. When you look at the staff report that was shown, and in particular the aerial footage, it's clear that yes, to the northwest, there are single-family homes, but to the southeast, southwest, there's a mixed use of M1 zoning what we're proposing would take an empty lot that has sat since approximately 1995 and turn that into essentially a buffer between those uses that's already there. This is a situation where I think this is an excellent infill project. We have appropriate streets, services are available. We're not taking something and asking for a different use for the property. There are several things with regard to both the staff report and the engineering report that's incorporated that I do want to call out that don't really fit this particular application. With regard to section 2.7.2, the narrative regarding transportation and connectivity is not applicable to this property. I mean, we're not on State Highway 2021, we're not on an expressway. It's something that I do think the record needs to reflect, that that's just not accurate in this situation. The other items as to what the ability to share my screen with regard to it appears that this is frozen, but what is referring to is what was submitted, which is a description that was, it was entitled example of a 10% open space park within essentially the area that would be used as that collector, or not the collector, but that circulator within the interior, that there is space in this layout to have both open space, the appropriate 26-foot driveway that's required. The other item is that the existing fourplex units that are there, the applicant is a partner in the redevelopment of those fourplexes. And it has shown the substantial investment and has shown the quality, as you can see from the elevations that were provided, that this would be something that would add significant value to the area. It would be redevelopment of something that has sat essentially since 1995. In particular, the staff report called out that those fourplexes had not been redeveloped. They have. Examples of that are what was shown here, and that what's being proposed would complement what's already there. That we have fourplexes, we have higher density industrial uses to the south and east, and then you have single-family residential more to the north side. The other...
Mr. Spiker, is this a photo of the existing property that you're showing me now?
It is.
We will have to include this exhibit as one of the exhibits for the hearing.
And all of these images have been provided to staff this evening. So we have copies that we can add into the record, Mr. Hearing Examiner.
Okay, for the record, we will call that your presentation, Exhibit 5, SUP 21-9-5, for the photos and exhibits you have before me on the floor here.
Thank you.
So they'll fall under that grouping of item 5.
With regard to, again, the parking that's available, what's being proposed is approximately 123 spaces. Some of that, if a 10% open space is applicable to a special use permit as to individual lots, given that we are not on a subdivision preliminary plat application or a final plat application, that there's enough space to keep the required parking, because what we have are essentially garages underneath a portion of the first floor of what's being proposed for the fourplexes.
Mr. Spiker, are you referring to the center exhibit Nelson Estates subdivision lot line adjustment 2? Is that display the parking arrangement you're talking about? This is a crucial issue. I'm not really clear on what we're reviewing tonight, and that's the first I've seen of that.
So with regard, I believe.
Yeah, the microphone, please.
Let me get back to the microphone. With regard to what I'm holding, what you referred to, this I believe is what Ms. Root was referring to with regard to a proposed parking layout that would incorporate open space within the interior of the existing lot, as would be adjusted by a proposed lot line adjustment. And to come back to the lot line adjustment, what's being proposed has lots that exceed 9,900 square feet on interior lots and 11,250 square feet on the corner lots, which, if footnote 7 is applicable to this application, would meet the requirements. And when we look at what in this situation, the Caldwell City Code does not call out specific density requirements within the code. What it has is a purpose statement. When you look at the purpose statement for R2 medium density residential, it talks about the purpose of the medium density residential zone is to provide areas of zoning procedures in accordance with the comprehensive plan that provide medium density residential development areas at a density consistent with the comprehensive plan. In this situation, all of the lots that are affected by this application are designated as the traditional neighborhood category within the future land use map in the comprehensive plan. That designation has a density of not less than 5 and not more than 20 units per acre, which is why the application was presented the way, in the manner of which it was. That we believe that footnote 7 is applicable in this situation, because this is, or I should say, these are lots that are part of a final plat. And when we look at what the future land use map designates as the density, we're well within that at 60 units. We've got 3.6 acres. That would be approximately 72. We're under that. And that, as on the large board that we had just looked at, there's sufficient space in that to address both the required street buffers, the internal circulation route, and provide a building envelope on the essentially efficient designs that are being proposed, which were included within the application itself. With regard to several of the proposed conditions of approval, I believe that it would be appropriate that there's a condition of approval that these lots comply with Caldwell's landscape ordinance. But within that is a process to request essentially a reduced buffer area. And the note, the condition of approval, 9.5 would require a fixed minimum 15-foot wide landscape buffer along Madison and First Avenue, and would not allow us to address that within the landscape plan review process, which we believe in this situation is appropriate because of where a fence would be required to be placed, in particular along the Dallas Court. That in that situation, if the intent is to reduce or prevent the use of the Dallas Court for on-street parking, there's applying essentially allowing, or requiring a 10-foot landscape buffer before you can have a fence really doesn't serve much purpose in that situation. And it would, I think that we can address that within the landscape plan review process rather than having fixed buffers at this point as a condition of approval. With regard to 9.1, the first proposed condition of approval, it's regarding or specifying essentially consistent with requirements, unless otherwise specifically stated otherwise in the development agreement or in the order of decision for the special use permit and preliminary plat. In this situation, we're simply seeking a special use permit, and we're not seeking to enter into a development agreement as part of a preliminary plat in this situation. I don't believe that particular language would be appropriate. As you would address with regard to the chicken and the egg question of a lot line adjustment as to whether that should be required before a special use permit is entered, I think in this situation, a special use permit that specifies that lots that comply with the minimum requirements of the code, which I think there's a determination to be made as to whether footnote 7 applies or not, is sufficient in this matter. But where we have a difference of interpretation as to the applicability of that section, to require one way or the other, I don't believe is appropriate before a special use permit can be entered, given that that can be addressed as a condition of approval. With regard to 9.3, there's no objection to having a condition of approval that the structures be constructed in substantial compliance with the elevations and the plans with regard to the proposed fourplexes that have been provided. That was essentially why those were provided.
Mr. Hearing Examiner, there are two 9.3s I noticed, so that would be 9.3A will use the precedent.
About 9.3B. Is that the first one being A, second one being B?
All right, however suits you.
Thank you. Does that conclude the remarks, Mr. Beckman?
The final remark that I would have at this time, before I would invite any questions, are with regard to the 10% qualifying open space. This is a situation where we're not seeking to have a plat. This is something that is already entitled for an R2 as to this property. While my client is willing to provide 10% open space, a requirement that we are, a requirement that the 10% open space not include areas that would serve as a utility easement, given that along the center of this, essentially the proposed development, would make an excellent place for a walkway, which would have no issue going over the top of a utility easement. I believe that there's room in that to provide for open space, to meet that amenity, to meet that, the benefit that that would provide. But to shoehorn what we're asking for, which are special use permits for individual lots, into essentially a preliminary plat or a final plat application requirement, I don't believe is appropriate in this situation. Stand for any questions. Mr. Examiner?
Thank you, Mr. Spiker. The, first question I have is this exhibit, it's labeled in the lower right-hand corner A1, example of 10% open space park. And it's in the state subdivision lot line adjustment number 2, part of the exhibit 5. Is this your final statement on the lot layout, the open space, the parking? Is this the exhibit that we're going to consider for approval?
In this situation, what that exhibit does is it illustrates that there are sufficient space to meet those conditions of approval if they're required.
And that's a no?
So with regard to that,
I'm looking for an absolute. Is this it or is this not it?
no, that would not be the final site plan.
Thank you. Going through, I appreciate your examination of the conditions of approval, and they'll be taken into consideration. We'll have a discussion on the footnote number 7, and we do have a legal opinion on that. And so, a question on the exhibits that you have in front of us, essentially the plat map, or how you refer to that, again, also labeled as A1, is that identical to the exhibit that was part of the application? It looks the same.
This would be what is again marked as sheet 1, but titled current submittal, 15-lot subdivision, has the dimensions with regard to the proposed area for vehicular utility and recreational access easement. But that was what was submitted with the application.
Yeah, looks like exhibit site plan 83. I just want to clear this up, and same question about these other 2 exhibits showing the floor plans. Are these identical to the ones that are already in the application?
That is my understanding.
And as well as this rendering on the stand, that looks the same. So I just want to, clarify the exhibits here, that they're all part of the record. You have the same automobiles in there, so we're good on that one. The problem that I'm having, I'm sure, the problem everybody wanting to review this, the public and the staff, is that we don't have a final drawing of this nature, and that's typical, or not only typical, but required of any kind of application before the city in order to make a full analysis and evaluate the merits of the plan. So we'll call that just a typical exhibit, not the final one. That'd be the example of 10% open space, A1, that I've already included as part of exhibit 5.
Excuse me, is there any way that we could see?
Sir, wait till you testify, please.
I'm just trying to look at the evidence.
Okay, I will have chance for that. When we're through, we might have these exhibits arrayed around the dais here so the public can review them as well. Appreciate that. And just a note, you addressed the density requirements being not in the code, presumably as creatures of the comprehensive plan. And we do agree with that, but there are lot size requirements that are absolute and street width requirements that are absolutes that define at least the minimum size for given property, and that, by doing the math, does yield at least a minimum unit count for the given lot size. It's not a density question, it's a dimensional question, and that part of the code is really clear. And like that, do you have a plan for a final exhibit that's going to show the lot lines, the dimensions, the landscaping, everything above is typically required of a special use permit of this nature? But we're not there yet. Do you have that?
At this time, it's my understanding that there is not a site plan which would have all of the components of the landscape plan, but that the landscape plan could certainly be applicable to what we have at this point. So if you're looking for a separate exhibit which would have a landscape plan on it, we do not currently have that.
Well, I'm looking for all the above. The parking, the lot lines, the setbacks, the things that we normally review in a development application. I'm a little concerned that I don't have that in front of me now and have the ability to review that in context of this application. That's all the questions I had. I thank you for your testimony, and we'll move on to those who are here to testify in favor of this application. Next I have Mr. Douglas Adams. Would you testify, please?
Douglas Adams, 3527 South Federal Way, Suite 103, Boise, Idaho, 83705. I have been sworn.
Thank you very much. Go ahead, please.
This has been a very interesting situation. The things that we've been talking about here with the example for the 10% open space, that went to the city back in October. I've been asking for them to meet with me since August of last year. When I filed my first sittings with the city, I didn't get an answer from the city. I got nothing for 3 months. That was why he's here. And so basically, I've been trying to work with the city to do this. But I don't want to get into a whole lot of that stuff. What I want to do is answer questions about this stuff. And before I do that, when we bought, to get to where we could work on this land, we bought the 2 fourplexes in the lot up in the northeast corner. We have put $680,000 into the rehab of that between me and my partners. We have repainted, we have stripped out the old parking lot. We've done all the stuff we can to make it a better, and we've landscaped it. We've done all the stuff like $680,000 a line. I'm about $70,000 into this right now as it stands. And so I haven't been trying to get by with anything. Right now, the biggest problem I have is the point of whether or not 7A applies or doesn't. I've heard two things from the city attorney that I've been told, and so we need to resolve that, because I can't do the final stuff. For me to put the final stuff that you want to see in line, I have to know what I'm doing, and the city attorney told me something different, or told him something different than what he's told, what I've been hearing tonight. So I need to find out if 7 applies. If 7 applies, then my stuff can go and we get going on the 15 lot, and I can do all the things that you're talking about. The purpose of the Madison Estate example, 10% open space lot line adjustment two, is because I have different subdivision plans all over the place, and it was my way of keeping track of them. But that was a way to show Deb that we could apply the 10% to get the 10% open space. If, I personally don't think it applies because we're not doing the zoning, but, you know, she says, so I try and do what we can. We're trying to do the 10% open space, and to do that, I have another 23 or 30 parking spaces that I can eliminate from that drawing and come up with, we need 16,335 square feet based on 3.76 acres. So I can get that. The other thing is I have some leeway in sliding between the back of the buildings and that parking you're seeing. But what I'm going to end up with, because this subdivision was originally platted, they put in all the improvements. And so those improvements go right down that line. And I'm talking sewer, water, electric, the whole 9 yards. And so when we're looking at this, we're coming up with, it's easier to have the easement where all that is, because to me, if I'm the city and I want to dig up a sewer line, or I want to dig up a water line, it's easier to do that in dirt than it is to take out a parking lot to get there. So we thought we would add 20 feet to that area between the rows of parking. That would give us 26 feet. Right now, on the parking lot, we have 26 feet for each driveway. We have 20 feet for each parking, the space as far as that goes, and we have about 6 feet between the turn-ins for the buildings. So we can meet all the criteria that you're talking about. But the 7 is the key. I mean, what are we doing? And as far as the rest of this goes, when the city wanted no driveways coming out onto Madison, and so that leaves you not a lot we can do with it. So the only way was the internal driveway. So we put the internal driveway. That drives my cost up by probably $500,000 because I've got to pave each side of that I wouldn't have to pave normally if we could just back out onto the street. Can't do that. So there's $500,000 that gets added to my cost. The next thing that happens is the city wants me to put sidewalks in, take out the existing curb cuts, the existing driveway, all that, and put new sidewalks in, and take out the curb cuts. That's another $200,000 or $300,000. When I get done with all the things the city wants, it's gonna come up to $1.5 million. And so the next thing that happens is we want you to have 40 units. Can't do it. The cost is not effective to do that if I've got to change out of the street, if I've got to change all the driveways, if I have to pay for those costs, if I have to pay 2 streets on the internal to make it so it works, it doesn't make sense to do. So, that's where I'm at. Right now, I'm waiting to see if we're gonna get 7. If 7 counts, we believe it does. Because when you get done, and I file the legal descriptions for each of these lots, and they record that the county's gonna look at Madison Estates, just like the 15-lot subdivision is, it's wherever it went, right there. This is what you're gonna see at the county level. So, that's why that is drawn that way. So, to do that costs $25,000 with the engineer. I put him on hold because I've been fighting this now since, like I said, September, end of August, to get somewhere where I know what I'm doing without any feedback. So, that's my 5 cents worth. If you have any questions that I can answer, please tell me.
Thank you, Mr. Adams. I've had that discussion with staff on the so-called footnote 7. They're very clear that it doesn't apply in this case, and that's the information that we're working on. And if you have another way to that, is through this process. And as you're well aware, the choices here are approval, denial, or possibility for tabling to resolve some of those issues. So that's where we find ourselves now. It's I don't have the authority to change that. 7% rule, the one that is supposedly, in footnote 7, I'm sorry, that it is the fulcrum upon which your design rests. I have to go with what's in front of me, which is that does apply. And, we have to, assume as much. You know, the possibly a better strategy would be to, design with that in mind and make an appeal to the city council. I have no leeway on that. I'm acting, I have to act on what, I get from the authority, which in this case is the staff and the city consulting attorney. And so, the point of clarity for me, maybe it does not for you, and that's the conundrum we find here, which is, again, it's sort of the chicken and the egg, you know, what are the requirements, and then we can design to those requirements. I'm not seeing a complete design, which is my purview, to analyze an application in its completeness, whether it meets or does not meet the code. It's just that simple. And so, you know, this is, for whatever reason, we find ourselves, you know, in this conundrum that, you know, is it the 10% break or is it not the 10% break? And I have clarity on the issue. We've discussed it in other contexts. And my authority just means, you know, the city and the rulings they've made in prior cases. I don't set that precedent. I just merely convey it in the context of this application. And so, you know, I'm still looking at a case that is not fully baked. And I understand the issue, but you know, the context that I have here is, you know, approve, deny, approve conditions, deny, or table, and see what can work out. And that's the discussion we'll have further. That I have. Go ahead.
I have a question. If you're saying that the council's the only people that can make the decision as whether 7 applies or not, I'm trying to understand. Is that what you were saying effectively?
We'll have a discussion, I'll ask that question of staff. And that's the way I address the question to me, and I'll convey that to staff, and we'll have a discussion.
Okay. Whatever you find, if that resolves, I mean, if that were to be resolved in my favor, then I would be able to do the 15 lot. You're gonna tell me I gotta ask staff that? Is that the next thing?
The footnote 7 is the issue.
Yeah, if 7 is approved in this case, then I can do the 15 lot subdivision. I'm sorry, I don't know all the right, I do, but I missed.
Well, I understand the intent.
Yeah, so, if that's the case, then I would, be able, that would then become, or wherever it is, this thing would then become what was filed with the county with the separate legal descriptions on each of those, and away we would go. We would have to file, at that point, we could finish up the landscaping, we could finish up all the other stuff, and that would be, the conditions by which I would be able to do that.
Well, and there's also a question there. I'm not sure even given a 10% break, it would still fit. That's not displayed in front of me. I need measurements. I need you know, specific lines on the map to do that analysis. And it's, you know, I get a little bit here on my own, just from these small drawings. I figure it's not really clear that that's going to solve all of your problems.
That's the majority of them.
Yeah, it might. So that's yet to be found out. But I do appreciate your comments, and with that, I would like to go to the rest of those who wish to testify. And we'll have a chance for rebuttal, and we'll continue the discussion. Next on the list, Robert Caldwell.
Examiner. My name is Robert Pilot. I reside at 2805 Willow Falls Avenue here in Caldwell. I have been sworn in, and, I'm the property owner.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for your time. Obviously, there's a lot of unanswered questions here tonight. I feel a bit for Mr. Adams in that he had to come, tonight unprepared to know what he needed to prepare for. So, I was mentioned earlier, and I think it's worth repeating, that this went under contract for sale in May of 2021, and the application was submitted in August of 2021. And we are here in March now with our first opportunity to speak publicly about the process. So, it's been a little frustrating. My views on this are a little more global, and I hope you'll bear with me a little bit. You know, I respect the fact that the comp plan and zoning is established to be used as a template for growth moving forward. And, I think it's important that that is a living document and not something set in stone. And, the Madison parcel here is one of those things where, that case applies where maybe highest and best use isn't necessarily what the comp plan and the zoning shows. I've been listening to meetings over the course of the last 6 months. Time and time again, concerns are raised about Caldwell's growth. In the February 7th meeting, Mike Dittenberg commented publicly that they were desperate for housing in Caldwell. Same evening, Ms. Root spoke publicly and said that there was a need for housing to meet the demand for the workforce being employed in Sky Ranch. And so with those things against us, I think this is a canvas with some invisible lines that hopefully we can work through to adjust to maximize the potential of this property. It's an entire city block. It's a great infill project. It's on the north side of Caldwell, which is in desperate need of capital infusion. It's in urban renewal, which by definition is designed to repurpose life. Much of the growth to the north, as I'm sure you can all attest to, is causing great stress on Caldwell's infrastructure. This project is 1,600 feet from the freeway, and I think has little to no impact on Lincoln and Marble Front roads. So, I think that's a plus, because I think they're under pressure right now with the growth in the area of impact on the other side of Canyon Hill. Mobile homes, there's a bit of a potpourri around it. There's mobile homes to the northwest and southeast, and I think they're all within the current zoning. The street department, as mentioned, was M1 across the street. It's been alluded that this would be a great buffer, and I agree with that. I think that regardless of the outcome, it's important that we look at this property, and its density requirements, and maybe have a conversation ongoing about how we move forward with a little higher density project on the site. Mr. Adams, as he's attested to, has spent a large amount of money on the 2 existing fourplexes there. They do establish some sort of precedence there, even though the plat is older. Direct and indirect policy decisions have been made on the site that consequently, I think, hinder the value of the property and hurt with the FEMA floodplain and the city's designation of Madison being a collector. We have the inability to access Madison as a driveway access for ingress and egress. And I know that, as it's been mentioned, a cul-de-sac style entry to be paid by the landowners specifically to address that issue is certainly something I'm amenable to, but as Mr. Adams has stated, it's much more cost effective to divide the cost over 15 fourplexes than it would be over 21 residential lots. And quite frankly, I don't know how you can use the lots on Madison effectively as single family with no access off of Madison. So there's been some policy decisions that have hurt this property, in my opinion, and its value. I think, Mr. Adams' ownership of the two existing fourplexes and maybe some of the people who live in the neighborhood can attest to this. He's put a considerable amount of money into his fourplexes and really dressed them up. And, I think that's a good testament of his intentions with this property, even though there's some steps to maybe get through and some hurdles to overcome. I think his intentions are good and it will be a nice property in the end. It's my understanding that in traditional neighborhood, mobile homes are allowed, is that correct?
Address the questions to me, please.
Sorry, Mr. Examiner. In a traditional neighborhood housing, mobile home, zoning, a mobile home is
Well,
allowed.
there's modular housing and mobile homes are two different issues. Modular housing is allowed and they're, the same as stick built. But mobile, that's a whole different item here.
Okay. Well, I think my point is that's the low-hanging fruit for this property, but I think Mr. Adams and I both agree that it may not be highest and best for the neighborhood and the property in Caldwell as well. So, we're hoping that we can move towards affordable housing, workforce housing for the community on this high density. So, I think there's a lot of unanswered questions tonight, but I'm hoping that we can find a way forward instead of just saying no to how do we get to yes, and to move towards a high density situation on that parcel. So, with that, I would stand for any questions that you may have for me, sir.
I appreciate your testimony, sir. You made some excellent points. I have no questions. Thank you very much.
Sir.
The next person, Mr. Boutros, wish to testify, please.
My name is Ramsey Boutros. I live at 1116 Manila Drive in Caldwell, and I have been sworn in.
Thank you very much. Go ahead.
I've driven by the proposed development many times. I wondered at the partial status of the property, and now that I've read the staff report for this hearing, I understand the history. I think that some kind of development would do a lot of good in this location. I'm not saying that the city shops across the street are an eyesore, but a development done properly would improve this area. City staff also addressed this in the staff report, paragraph 2.8 on page 8. The city staff made some good comments in the staff report, specifically paragraphs 2.1 on page 10 and goal 2, policy 2-2 on page 12. I think the applicant should work further with staff to address their concerns and improve the development to support the overall goals and recommendations contained there. I also noted some boilerplate language in the staff report that could use editing. On page 4, paragraph 2.7.2, there's the wrong location listed, and 2.7.3 shows two different school districts. So there's some inaccurate information. On page 8 of the staff report, item number 6 mentions a homeowners association. With 15 lots containing 60 units, is it assumed that all units will be rentals with as many as 15 absentee landlords? This is not conducive to the Caldwell community goals found on pages 11 through 14 of the staff report. It might be a better plan to develop the property with a single owner to be responsible for duties normally relegated to an HOA. Finally, on page 13 of the staff report, the paragraph on transportation caught my attention. It is noted that an internal street is proposed to be built upon portions of the individual lots and requires a cross-access easement. But they also state that cross-access easements should be used in commercial developments. I think the applicant should do further work with staff to ensure that they are developing for the future and not creating potential problems that will need to be fixed. That's everything I had, sir. If you have any questions.
Thank you for your testimony, sir. I do not have questions, but I thank you for your insightful testimony. Again, it's quite informative for me and the staff. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next, we have Conrad Wood. Mr. Wood, if you'd like to testify, please.
Can I ask some questions here?
Yes, please, but if you state your name and address and if you've been sworn in, please.
Conrad Wood, I own 122 East Madison, Caldwell, Idaho, 83607. I have this.
Thank you very much. Go ahead. And you may ask questions, but if questions are to me, and I will get answers from those who you're asking.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
My first question is, I'm a little confused about who the property owner is, because I thought I saw a couple property owners come up, but then one of them alluded to the other person being the property owner. So I'm a little confused. Is this a conglomerate or an LLC, or is it property, is it a single person?
The staff report listed as property owner is Sundowner Inc., care of Robert Pilot, the gentleman who just testified.
Okay, so a little bit of background about me. This house butts up against the, Caldwell Road Department, and it went through a fire, and I bought it, when it had gone through a fire. I was obviously aware of the empty lot. I actually had tried to get a hold of owners to see if they were interested in selling it at one time. I got this property in 2018, I believe, or 2019. We did an extensive remodel. Everybody at the city was great to help me through. I did have a question though, because my property is in the flood map, and it shouldn't have been, because I did the paperwork for that and had an engineering report on it, which I'll have to follow up on. So I put about $200,000 into that at a time when those houses were worth about $200,000 plus buying the property. A very high-end, as most energy efficient as I could, low windows, all that kind of stuff. So I made the investment in this neighborhood quite some time, so that either my mother or my father and his wife could move into the property. My father and his wife moved into the property. They're in their early 60s and retired. He unfortunately passed away in October, and so now I have her living there by herself. So one of my main concerns is the actual safety of what's going on. We have a great neighborhood with a lot of great neighbors. Anytime you do any apartment type complex, I mean, unless I guess you're in downtown Boise, everybody talks about low income and they're great, and we're doing, giving people places to live and stuff like that, but what you also get a lot of the time is you get a lot of crime, you get a lot of, people coming and going at all hours of the night. Caldwell in this area and in the downtown area doesn't have the greatest track record. It's cleaned up substantially, but I worry about that. I wanted to know, is this a low-income project? Is there any federal money or any city or state grant money for low income being put in on this? Are we doing Section 8? Are we doing low income? Are we doing senior? What are we doing? And I do have a question as to what are we doing? Because it's my understanding that right now it's a 20 or 21 lot piece that could be used for housing to match the other housing in the area. I know that there is mobile homes. I don't know which area, so in the picture it would be the upper left-hand side. There are some mobile homes over there. On my side, other than the city, we're all homes. Behind us is all homes. I know many of the neighbors over at Nicholas Court, they're all homeowners. We're all worried about our property values. I mean, I went out on a limb and put the money out. I realized that they put money out too, but I did also. My next door neighbor, after we remodeling a house is, like a flu, it's infectious, everybody wants to do it. So after I started, suddenly the neighbors started painting their house, and they put a roof on, and they put windows in, and the people over on Nogales Court came over, and we talked, and they did some projects. So it's a great community that's going on over there. I have personally had property that I've lived in that has seen projects like this go in that have destroyed those community aspects with people who maybe don't have pride of ownership or respect the things that they're getting, because of maybe they're getting them for free or subsidized, or maybe it's just the class of people who move in. So I'm scared about those things. I'm also scared about the parking. It seems like throughout the evening, we were talking about parking, and it continuously was trying to get chipped away. 1.5 units, that may be what the law says. That's pretty scary. You're talking about 60 units, and we're gonna have, the rent is not gonna be $700 a month. I know that one of the owners or the corporation put a lot of money into the, 3 apartment complexes all there. Unfortunately, the byproduct of that was that everybody pretty much moved out, including numerous people that I knew over the year that I was remodeling the house who I had met. I realized that that's the way of the world, and they spent a lot of money on it. But you know, there is displacement that comes with this. The damage is already done, but where are we at? You know, what are we doing? We're talking about $1,200, $1,300 a month minimum. You know, so you're gonna have 2 people for every apartment, plus at minimum 1 child, I would suspect. So we're talking 180 people in that subdivision would not be out of the ordinary to see. Most Americans have 1 car per adult. Maybe they don't when they're living in apartment complexes. Certainly the apartment complexes that I've been around, a lot of times they have 1 unit plus extra units that can be bought, plus overflow. So I'm very, you know, if we're talking 60 units, 120 cars, and we only have 90 spots, is my front that there is no sidewalks suddenly gonna be a parking spot? Is all of Madison gonna be a parking spot now? You know, what are we gonna have for night traffic? What are we gonna have for, I know these things don't matter according to the law, and I, as a builder, and I appreciate some of the stuff, but these are things that I would like taken into consideration that could be mitigated somehow, definitely by more parking. I looked at this property and tried to do something with it. I'm no expert, but I believe that what they're doing with the center strip is all you can do, seeing how Madison somehow became where you couldn't, use the driveways that are already existing. So that, you know, they're already existing and they set it up for those lots. So I'm with the developers on that. In my mind, you know, when you're presented with something, just because they suddenly decided it was in a floodplain or something, you know, there should be some leeway there from the city governments to help out with those things, or at least, you know, possibly give them some kind of leeway to make it happen, as long as that fire truck can go through both areas, that they can provide service. I think that that's probably your best bet if you don't want something going on in Madison. I was also concerned with Nogales Court. Why can't we eliminate a little bit of the property there? He has half of a keyhole on 1 lot. Again, I guess taking the developer's side. You know, if we could have that court go all the way through, he would lose a little off 1 lot, but gain a little on the other, and that might be a workaround. Plus, that would definitely help. It would help the people in Nogales Court, and I think it would help alleviate some of the traffic in the 8 o'clock a.m. and in that 5 o'clock area, where I've noticed, being an owner for 3 years there, that we do have substantially more traffic now, especially if there's any kind of backup. And with the road construction, that hopefully will go away, you know, at U-Stick and such. A lot of people take those exits now to get where they're going. historically, apartments drop property values. I can't stop it from being built, but, you know, there's a lot of residents who have pride of ownership and have done all we can. From my personal perspective, now I'm looking at, I put top dollar and top amenities into a nice, little community that I believed that there would be houses going in there eventually when the market came up to the point where it is now. You know, so now, how do you liquidate an asset when you get to look at a low-income apartment complex or something of that nature? Now, I keep saying low-income, maybe that's not what's going on, but I've kind of heard keywords that government likes to hear being thrown around by the investors, so that's usually what I ask about there.
Mr. Wood, could we wrap it up, please?
Okay. And then I was wondering, if we do have an increase in traffic, my property does not have a sidewalk in front of it, so will the city then come to me and say, hey, we've had an increase in this traffic, and we need you to install sidewalks at your cost? That's one of my concerns with, due to the parking and foot traffic that I believe is gonna go on. And I would actually like to see a real plan of what they're actually doing. I guess the rest of the stuff can wait till the next time. Those are kind of my concerns and questions.
I appreciate your testimony, Mr. Wood, and thank you very much. I will address those questions to staff when the testimony is over.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Next we have in opposition, Susan Sebastian. Okay, testify please.
Hi, my name is Sue Sebastian. I live at 1415 Larry Lane. My access to my house comes off of Madison. It's a private drive. It joins an empty field.
You've been sworn in.
Oh, I've been sworn in, thank you.
Thank you very much.
The access to my property comes off Madison. It's a private driveway next to empty field that adjoins Madison in Illinois right now. I have been looking at this project since I moved there myself. When I considered buying the property I bought, I looked at this empty lot. And one of the concerns I have, first of all, is I was unable to go to the neighborhood meeting last year because it was just short notice by the time I received the letter regarding the notification for the neighborhood meeting. And they did have a narrative that was presented. Obviously, it was for, at that time, I think 18 units, or 18 sites, fourplexes. Part of the concern I have is they want to reactivate a 20-year-old SUP, and the SUP that was granted originally included that lot that was partially built on, and the underground utilities on the remaining 15 or 17 lots, or if you look at every one of these plats, they have different numbers of lots on them. So basically, you got 20-year-old structures and infrastructure on that have been put in on the dirt lot, and then the two buildings, which are the fourplexes, according to Pioneer Title, was noted as a separate subdivision. So one of the things I guess overall I want to say is this thing is so disjointed. Even as a licensed architect, I'm a retired architect, I'm having a hard time figuring this property out. Because there's 4 different plat maps, a site plan that shows no footprints, no easements, no sidewalks, no elevations, or parking incorporated. Dimensionally, I looked at this, and I think that the common drive encroaches in the parking area. Because if you look at the building footprint, roughly 58 feet, I don't see how it works. Secondly, we have all single-story, single-family, uniquely styled houses that are not high-end houses. This is a $200,000 to $150,000 neighborhood. I bought my property because I'm trying to retire. I'm single. I wasn't trying to find a $500,000 house. So I knew what I was getting into, but more importantly, these people live in this neighborhood. Most were families. They own these houses. There may be a few rentals in there for the most part, but they're single-family, single-ownership houses. We're talking about a building that's going to be the maximum elevation. I was also aware of the floodplain changes when I bought my house. Luckily, mine only hit the back corner of my property line, but I will tell you, when I worked on my backyard to put a garden in, I hit river rock and sand bottom, which is essentially river bottom, at about 2.5 feet. So yes, it has flooded before, or it was a river at one point. I also lived on the river in Garden Valley. I sold my house up there, And the river is mobile. It is a fluid thing that changes all the time. And maybe we've had a few years of drought, but I guarantee you, things flood just like in Weiser and everywhere else. I've been in Idaho for 45 years. So what I'm basically against, first and foremost, is this application packet. It's so disjointed, it has so many conflicting information in each of these applications with dimensions. We have stairwells and setbacks. We're looking at a monotonous project with basically every single building being similar with maybe some gingerbread changes that are gonna be at minimal setbacks from side yard to side yard. No open play areas for children, and even in the existing property that's over on the corner with those two fourplexes, the kids play in the dirt all day long. There is no play area. So I do have a problem with a private common area that keeps these kids off of Madison. I lived there, and when the freeway was shut down last summer, it became a freeway on Madison. That is not a wide enough street to allow for double-sided parking, which is what will happen to all the houses along there if this project gets put through, because what I'm seeing on some of the rentals over on Illinois is we've got 6, 7, 8 adults living in these places with 5 cars and 3 cars in the front yard on the dirt. So we're talking multiple vehicles. There is no guest parking because you have to provide that. I don't see handicap accessibility or adaptability to any of these first floor units looking at the floor plans or how the parking lot would be configured for handicap spaces, which according to the state of Idaho, we should be doing. And in addition to that, I think that the multifamily aspect for this personal area, I don't think it's suitable for the density value. If you go down the freeway, which I drive every day to Boise, in that bumper-to-bumper traffic, we see many, many 3-story cookie-cutter buildings all along the freeway, and most of these are not integrated into single-family, single-level houses. So the other thing I just wanted to bring up was the original plat that was approved in 1999 of July. According to the letter written by Linda James, which is in this application packet, she states that there was a paragraph saying, keep in mind that no changes in the commission's approval can be made unless a new request is made and granted. And this is by Linda James back in 1999. That was for the 17 lots were 4plexes and 3plexes were on 3 lots. So this project was essentially started and never completed, abandoned for nearly 18 years. And I don't feel it's sufficient evidence to want to reactivate any SUP. This should be a new approval. And in my opinion, with the disjointed nature of every one of these submittals that have been shown here, it's on the website, that this application should be withdrawn and this package should be completed in the normal way most submissions would be if you were in Boise or any other city, showing site plans with adequate information in detail, with floor plans that show how they're going to actually have storage spaces, because there's no storage in any of these units. So where do you think it's going to be? In the garages. So where's the cars going to go? On the street. So there's a lot of issues with common open space, storage, access for fire, EMS, and ambulances not to be parked on Madison. I'd like to see a perimeter fence on this property so that kids aren't going out into the middle of Madison with their balls and getting hit by a semi-truck, because that's what goes up and down that street all day long. And these are just my personal opinions, but I would like to see the city step back and have this package cleaned up and submitted like it should be with the proper site layout. The individual lots should be laid out. This is really a reconfiguration and not a lot line adjustment, because these lots don't even match up. And then I'd like to see a site plan with detailed landscaping, open space requirements met, common areas for kids to play. Parking that's going to be adequate for guest parking and for the residents. And also, like I said, a perimeter fence to keep these people off of Madison. Because like I said, that street is only busier this summer. That freeway's been worked on when it blocks off for accidents. They use Madison as a second thoroughfare. I ride my bike all the time around there. Believe me, I'm really careful. So I would just request that this is one of the considerations that you're looking at before you have this package reevaluated. And certainly for a public hearing, our neighborhood really has had very little notification on what's been going on here. I've been basing all my information off of what's on the website. And that's all I really have to say. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Appreciate it. I would like to address, some of your questions from Mr. Wood. The question about federal money, Section 8 subsidizing, that hasn't come up. I haven't seen mention of that. That's something that we'll address to the applicant. The parking issue, been mentioned several times. They have exceeded the requirement, even though, we know how that goes. People tend to collect automobiles. Then it becomes somewhat of an enforcement issue. That at least the latest iteration of the plan that we've seen has shown an excess of the required parking of 1.5 units, 1.5 stalls per unit. Mr. Woodley, good question about the cul-de-sac. We'll address that to the applicant and staff. As far as your sidewalks are concerned, that's a whole different issue. It's usually not retroactively required unless there's some development or street improvements or reclassification of the street and so forth. That's something that would not be addressed with this application. It'd be something entirely different. This is not a reactivated plat. We're starting with a clean slate here under the current ordinances, under the current comprehensive plan. Even though the zoning is set up, there's no zoning change request with this application, which would kick in another set of another part of the ordinance. I do agree that this needs to be cleaned up, resubmitted, and it's not clear right now. That's the nature of my question earlier for both the staff and the applicant. The parking, the city has not required parking in excess of what the current ordinance is. That becomes an ordinance issue, an amendment to the ordinance, but in extenuating circumstances, there may be reason to ask for additional parking. I don't know if that's been a consideration or question with this application. With that, I would like to ask the applicant if they want to rebut, and I'll allow 5 minutes for rebuttal.
If I could just have one second.
Please, yes. And identify yourself again, please, for the record.
Doug Evans, 3527 South Federal Way, Suite 103, Boise, Idaho, 83795.
You've been sworn in. Thank you very much.
The problem, as far as there's no federal monies going into this, there's nothing. Section 8 no offense, I've been leasing buildings, I've been building multifamily for 20, 30, 40 years. And basically, I built a couple thousand units, and Section 8 actually, I have built using multifamily bonds for tax-exempt bonds, and thereby you have to set aside, but this isn't that. This is straight old, yes, sir. This is straight old financing, conventional Wall Street type stuff. But I'm gonna try and do this. You guys need to look at this. This is.
That was not in the application package.
Please address me, please, and
Okay.
I'll convey questions where they're needed.
Okay. I would say that I would advise them, the people that have spoken tonight, if they have questions, I'll wait around afterwards if they want to talk to me. If they want to ask you and you ask the planners or ask me, I'll do whatever it takes or whatever's needed. The purpose of these different site plans is the original, the first lot line adjustment, and our lot line adjustment. And I can't do our lot line adjustment, as we discussed earlier in the evening. I need to know, what the city will allow. There's a part of the code that says that it's called number 7, it's in the zoning code 10.0203, and that gives all the criteria that the city has set out for multifamily, zoning. And in there it says that if you're part of a subdivision or part of a plat, a final plat, then you get to deduct, 1,000 feet or 10% off the, size of the lots, the final lots that you're doing. So the city says I have 11,000 and 12,005 that I'm required to do. If 7 applies, then that takes it off by that 10% per space. And that's what this is based on, it's what the other one is based on. So, I'm trying to think of all the questions that they had. If you have any, if you can help me out, sir, I'd appreciate it. Mr. Examiner?
Thank you for your testimony. Give me a moment.
Sure.
I'll look through my notes here.
I've got one while you're thinking about it.
Sure. Okay.
The parking, what we were showing here is that we've got 2 parking spaces per, in fact, we're over 2 per unit. We have under building parking, 5 parking spaces per building, and, then we have the exterior parking along the different roads, the different things. And in that, we have called out, 143 total spaces, 120 required, not 90. 120 is 2 per 60 divided by 2 spaces per. So I still have 23 lots in this design, in the design for the, 10% open space. I have to get to 2 spaces, I'm at, that would be 120 spaces, and I have 143 that's provided right now in this design. So,
But there is no common driveway when you're here.
Please, address the questions to me.
There's no common driveway in that layout.
yeah, there is, it's right here, 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 and here. This goes out on the first.
Sir,
goes out on the-
please
Yes, sir.
address your questions to me.
Okay,
We'll just have to close the testimony.
okay.
Thank you.
The driveway has access points to First Avenue and to Third Avenue. In answer to her question.
Okay, Mr. Wood addressed the cul-de-sac or the half cul-de-sac. Sir, have you looked at that as a point of ingress egress?
In our meeting originally, we had with the citizens for the, when we made our original application back in September, they said they didn't want us parking, their big fear was us parking along Nogales Court. And so as far as the cul-de-sac, if that's the one you're referring to, which is that half.
Correct.
Half cul-de-sac, we said we would put a fence up to stop access from our units into Nogales Court. If there's a 6-foot fence there, nobody's gonna be parking their car there because there's no gate in that fence. So they'd have to scale the fence to get into the project. And that's what I told planning we would do, and so in the app, did I put that in the app?
It's been in the discussion.
Yeah, so, as far as going ahead and pushing Nogales Court through, you would have to ask the planners what their view of that is, or what, is he gone?
For a minute.
Okay, you have to ask Rob, from the engineering, what he thinks of that.
I will, thank you very much. The question I do have, it's been brought up a couple of times about the market to which you're offering these. Is that a rental market? Is it a buying, single-family ownership? What's your plan for that?
When we started this, my idea was to get units on, bring as many units online as I could, as fast as I could, and we needed to be building into the market that's now going away from us. And so, to do that, we started originally with a PUD that I submitted to the city that was basically this design, the design?
Correct.
Okay,
Yeah.
only it had
Exhibit A1.
76 units in it.
10% landscaping.
So, I'm losing my train of thought here.
To whom are you marketing the
We're
product?
marketing it to, we're not going to have low-income units. We're not aimed at low-income units. Right now, the units that we've finished and flipped, when we bought them, they were renting for $825 average. Right now, we've got $1,800 a month, and I've got pretty much a waiting list at $1,800 to fill those units in. These units, if they're built, there's 4 different types of units in each building. There's a 1-1, it has a garage access. There's a 2-1, it has a garage access, private garage access. Then you have a 2-2 upstairs and a 3-2 upstairs that extend back over the parking. Those units have their own individual garage access plus a front door, just like the lower units do. Those unit prices will range anywhere from probably $1,200 to $1,400 for the 1-bedroom, up to $2,500 or $2,600 for the 3-2. We'll get it. There's not a problem with that. I see that in the future, if I was under construction right now with the buildings, I would probably have applied for something that would let me turn them into condos. Whether that would be a PUD or if I could just file a condo plat over it, I'd have to ask you what you were looking at doing. But the big thing was to get them under construction so that they were available for the housing shortage that this town has.
Thank you for that answer.
As I wander around it.
A good question for staff. I have no further questions at this time, but I would like to address questions to the staff and try to relate what I've heard here in the testimony. Thank you, Mr. Adams. And for the staff, I've got a long list of things here, but the large question that Mr. Adams has addressed is about the exception, the so-called footnote 7. Ms. Root, could you share your views and what the ordinance says about that, please?
So, thank you, Mr. Hearing Examiner. So I think what needs to be done there, because what I'm hearing is that the applicant's attorney and myself have heard 2 different things from our attorney, and so I think that needs clarification, because I would not dispute that possibly our attorney has, seen both sides. Well, she's gonna say that. And so I'd like to clarify that as well, because I'm working under one assumption and they're working under another assumption, and that's likely not a fair scenario to bring into this hearing body without having that answered. And then the second thing that I heard that causes me to think that I need to have further discussion with our city attorney on some language in the code is that they don't believe that this multifamily project is subject to the 10% requirement for open space in the landscaping code. And that's partially because the language in there clearly, and I copied that into the staff report, reads that multifamily that's part of a subdivision or a planned unit development. This is part of a subdivision, so I don't really have a problem with that, but I think it begs the question to our attorney to clarify that stance on, is it applicable or is it not? Because those 2 things are clearly problematic for their design right now.
Ms. Reed, on that question about the landscaping requirement, the open space requirement, that's what you're referring to last, that you don't have clarity on the open space requirement as well?
I have clarity on what we've been requiring every multifamily development to provide, and every planned unit development, which is that they have been required to provide the 10% qualifying open space. But I can see that there, could be a question in the language with the, as to how it's being read, and I would like clarification on that from our attorney.
Thank you, Mr. Reed. I have a number of questions, but I would like to comment on that the special use permit is that there. It is an agreement of the city to relax, or enhance some of the standards, relaxing perhaps in lot size, enhancing perhaps in amenities, and trying to achieve the best development possible. This is not a formula that you put in a number and crank it out on a spreadsheet and come out. It has to do with the situation in the community, as addressed by Mr. Woods and some of the others, of trying to fit in, and that's part of what we do here. We try to make these types of developments a viable and attractive part of the city. We have leeway under the special use permit to look at those kinds of considerations that manifest themselves in the nature of landscaping, access, aesthetics. It's a pretty broad palette that we have in this type of hearing, and that's the deal. We grant special use permits not as a formula, but as a means to try to improve the community through participation of both the city and the applicants, the landowners, the developers, to make it a better city. So I reject outright the notion that this is a formula you come in and you'll be held to just a number of this or a number of that. It has to work as a whole. It has to be, and for the developer, this is also a winning situation because people will pay for quality. And quality means a lot to land value. It means a lot to the community. It means a lot to taxable value, everything else. And so the idea that it is a cut and dry exercise and this number, that number, is not the way that any city that I know of approaches a special use permit. They do have leeway to ask for the best and expect the best, and so does the community. I'll get off that soapbox, but that's my take on this, and that's the nature of a special use permit. And if the circumstance dictates as such, we can ask for a higher level requirement. And so that's part of it, and that's also the developer's prerogative to seek an appeal to a decision or recommendation, as the case may be, from this body. And that applies to parking, lot size, everything else. So again, I'll get off my soapbox in this route. I do have the essential question here has to do with lot size requirements, and it's been my, let's say, knowledge through, close to 40 years of planning. The lot size is one of the foundations of the zoning code, and it is fairly immutable under any circumstance, whether it's a subdivision, a lot split, land division, whatever. The minimum lot size is one of the foundation numbers that we do stand by. Ms. Ruth, would you assert here that there is really no leeway in the minimum lot size requirements in this type of development or in any other type of development?
That is correct. So the director and I had determined in our policy to utilize footnote 7 when there was construction going on and say a storm pond had to be increased or a road design had to be changed a bit, which caused a lot to be decreased below the, standard lot dimension size. So in the case of this development, although I am in favor of the infill project on the whole, I think it, we are lacking information as to how that really looks, how packed in on these lots these houses may or may not be. I think that the code is clear on why the formula is set out the way it is to require that these lots be 11,000 and 12,500 square feet, so that there's adequate space on those lots provided, and that there's some, you know, accounting for the density that they're requesting. And so, we have been, applying the code in this way since I've been here, and I would stand by that, yes.
Thank you, Ms. Root. It seems to me that the design that they're, given design parameters, mainly the street down the middle plan that we're looking at, further subtracts from the lot size, even though we have done this many times in PDDs, particularly in apartment type situations. So that's not really an issue, but my point is that the lot size, by my calculation, for example, I looked at one of the interior lots and the actual building lot, once everything is subtracted, is around 6,500 square feet. And so we go from 11,000 lot size to 6,500 once we remove the streets, the open space, and all that sort of thing. And I'm not saying that's not unheard of, it's just putting a number to the building lot. And the corner lots would be different. It'll vary throughout, but that's the range of the buildable site that we're looking at, and which argues against even further variation from the code. I have to give merit to the argument of the applicant that some of the policy decisions, namely, the investigative West has given them design problems that they're problematic. I'll move on. I'm tending to ramble on here. There are a few more questions here that was addressed to me as far as first of all, let me just address the cross-access easement brought up. That's a function and a condition usually in a function of approval with the final special use permit approval, correct?
That is correct. This development as proposed would have to have a cross-access easement agreement to provide sufficient access to each of the lots.
And have we seen anything, a draft or a discussion about that? That's not a particularly difficult issue under these types of circumstances, is it?
No, and I have not seen any easement agreement.
Thank you. The applicant asked for a reduction in the buffer under potential condition 9.5 to, I believe, reduce the 15-foot minimum. Could you discuss that? There's some merit to that kind of reduction of the buffer, on the street buffer.
Well, there could be merit to it, but the street landscape buffer is 15 foot on Madison Avenue. If that were the rear of those, lots, those multifamily lots, the setback is 15 feet. So it's, kind of a mute discussion.
Ms. Reed, would that require a variance application or a variance in conjunction with, this type of application?
So I believe what I heard when that was raised for 9.5, they were requesting that it not be specific, that condition basically not be specific or allow for the reduction in buffer width that the code provides for. In this case, there's not, so one case that was utilized for that reduction in buffer width was that, at the 10th hour of an application, it was determined that a turn lane had to be added to, and for access to an adjacent property. And so that made sense that buffer width was reduced, although, again, the setback, it did not reduce it below the minimum required setback for the property. And in this case, the 15-foot wide street landscape buffer can be, in fact, the setback of the, unit from the street, which would be required anyway.
Thank you, Ms. Root. Mr. McDonald, I do have a question, just to clarify the record about the, access on Madison and First, what's, just to elucidate the staff's position on that, and, why the result of that is the road going through the center of this project, please.
Yes, for the record, Rob McDonald, 621 Cleveland Boulevard is my work address, and I have been sworn in.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Yeah, I appreciate that question, Mr. Hearing Examiner. We've looked at Madison at length in the past, and because of the connectivity to Centennial Boulevard and to North Illinois, we want to make sure we maintain that corridor feel. And so for that purpose, adding additional driveways along Madison is something that the city does not want to see. We appreciate greatly the developers, them working with us to provide an alternative solution, which is to have the driveway running through the middle of the site, and that was what the engineering department's preference was, and they accommodated that, and for that, we feel like that's a much better traffic scenario for the area as a whole, and for all the through traffic that's driving back and forth on Madison. And so what they're proposing here with the access through the middle is consistent and meets the engineering department's requirements.
Thank you, Mr. McDonald. The follow-up question is, have you had that discussion with fire as far as they're satisfied with that solution emanating from your policy?
So, Mr. Hearing Examiner, the fire department attends the roundtable meetings, and they have reviewed the site. They were at the roundtable meeting where the site was presented. They were also noticed on this application, and when we do not receive feedback from them or comments back from them, then our assumption is that they do not have any concerns with the way the site is configured.
Thank you, Mr. McDonald. I'm just going through, we had a lot of questions tonight. Sort of to that, Mr. McDonald, the applicant said something about there's not on an expressway. Was that a correction in the staff report?
Mr. Hearing Examiner, that is a correction to my staff report. It was the transportation section not Mr. McDonald's,
Oh.
engineering report.
I see. Okay, thank you, Ms. Root. Could you please note that correction for, the record? And the applicant talked about, the density requirements, which I've already addressed, but the density requirement is a non-issue here. It's the dimensional requirements, for lot size that is driving the housing number, and, the code is very clear on that. Mr. Pilot, had concerns about, he really a couple times about mobile homes, single-wise, whatever, that's not part of this application, and mobile home wouldn't be allowed, in this type of development. I just wanted to clarify that. The issue of homeowners associations, that's typically, something that is, required, but the city does not, participate in that. It's a private contract between individuals, but the city does need somebody responsible for the infrastructure, in this case, the road up the middle of that, and somebody would have to maintain that as it's not a dedicated right of way. And that's the one issue I'd see. Perhaps other things like exterior fencing, other types of infrastructure that would have to be maintained, that are part of a private ownership. Is that correct, Ms. Root?
Yes, this would be a private access that the homeowners association or a management company would have to, maintain the field. If each individual lot is sold separately, so basically a structure sold to a separate entity, they would have to still maintain as a conglomerate that, shared common drive and open space.
Thank you. And we do have examples, but not of this type. Well, let me just say I'm a little nervous about having 15 parties own right away. We've put conditions, but in the case that I was a party to, it has to do with a canal and creating a single lot over around the canal, so that could be managed by a single entity of homeownership. I'm not going to go there with this road, but I am very concerned that there is a homeowners association, binding them as a group to maintain whatever infrastructure ends up in this design. And that may also be part of perhaps a cross-access easement agreement. I don't know, that's a possibility. And the next question I have of staff, we've talked about the parking. Mr. Adams had indicated there's well over 120, I think, I forget the number exactly, 135 or so total lots. Does that, it more than meets the standard of this route, does that seem adequate when given the 5 parking stalls under roof in the units plus the 90 proposed?
The parking exceeds the standards of the ordinance. What we do see frequently, or what many applicants have indicated, is that our parking standards leave units underparked. So this applicant is, with the drawings that we have in front of us tonight, which I did not have at the time, but and with his testimony, has indicated that he more than exceeds the, parking that's required, and it exceeds it on-site, internal to the development, not with parking on Madison, which, it would be discouraged, and certainly not parking on Nogales, which the applicant was trying to abide by his commitment to the property owners when he had the neighborhood meeting.
Thank you, Ms. Root. I'd like to turn that question to Mr. McDonald. The cul-de-sac on the gallows, seems to me a viable opportunity to connect neighborhoods, connect subdivisions. I understand that the people in that neighborhood do not want it, but could you just give me a brief description of the discussion on that, of using that as a point of ingress egress?
Mr. Hearing Examiner, anytime you add the traffic from a multifamily onto a cul-de-sac or some road that has established housing, it always creates concern for the residents that live there. I haven't had discussion on that topic specifically in a while, and so I'm not recalling exactly what maybe what's said, but my recollection is that having access directly to First Avenue and Third Avenue are really the best locations to take access, and then it's a short jump onto Madison, where it's then a short trip to the interstate or to North Illinois. And so by pushing traffic up to the cul-de-sac, that would probably be problematic for many of those residents up there.
Thank you, Mr. McDonald. Just wanted to note there, just to clarify, this is not a reactivation of anything. I think you said it before, but this really, I'd just like you to comment on that this is not a reactivation of the older special use permit or plat.
This is not a reactivation of any plat. The applicant has submitted a special use permit and for a lot line adjustment, which are two new applications under the current code.
And thank you very much. And following on that, there's Mr. Adams expressed a desire perhaps to do a condo plat. Would that be something that would best be approached through this application, or is that something that, you know, could be followed up on, or what are your thoughts on a condo plat for something like this?
We can hope he wouldn't do that, but, because it would, you know, it hasn't been contemplated in our office that would be the deal. Our code allows for a condo plat, but he would have to come back to a hearing to do that.
Thank you very much. And lastly, to address one of the questions from Ms. Sebastian, this should be repackaged and resubmitted. I believe that reflects my opening statement here that I quite frankly don't have enough information to make any kind of decision here other than denial. As far as moving it forward, this needs to be clear, clean, in compliance type of application, which I'm not seeing. It makes me extremely nervous to essentially forward something that is played so loose with the standards, and I'm having a real problem with that. But having said that, I agree with everybody who's commented that this is where we should be building housing whatever density will work with the neighborhood. I absolutely agree. I think the applicant has a really good idea. I have no, fundamental, questions or problems with the type of application, type of product, put forward here. This is the right place, the right time. The concerns I have is, I don't have a complete application to base some kind of decision and or face, an appeal to the council and or possibly to district court. There's simply not enough information to, move this forward. With that, I will, close the public hearing. I will, hold on, Ms. Root, I'm assuming, one of the options, that, this body has is to table this to a date certain, and ask for, the kinds of things that we've discussed as far as getting a complete application is concerned.
Yes, and I believe that would be the preference of staff and the applicant to bring forward the documents that, could bring clarity to the project.
Well, thank you, Ms. Root. That's where my predilection goes. Just break this down. As it sits now, even with the additional exhibits and testimony, everything I have here, I still don't have a clear concept of what this looks like and what the city would be approving should it go forward. That's a foundation requirement of all applications, regardless of, we have essentially rejected applications that didn't provide all of the information that is required to look at a 60-unit building. That's a pretty significant number in the neighborhood, and absolute clarity is necessary for this in order to move forward, to bind the conditions, and to make it happen in the means that the code and the comprehensive plan and precedent dictate. With that, well, let me ask one more question. Ms. Root, should we decide to table this to a date certain, what kind of time frame do you think would be adequate? Mr. Adams, you can come forward and address me with that question, please.
I apologize. Doug Adams, applicant, 3527 Edmonds Road.
1 second, let me just make it clear. I reopened the floor for testimony, and Mr. Adams is going to address that question about a time frame for resubmittal of an application.
If we get the 7th question answered, it's gonna take a month for the engineer, maybe a month and a half for him to finish his work. For the things that you're looking for with all of the easements and the actual drawings, that's for the subdivision, for the plat, all that, that's gonna take him, like I said, a month and a half from the time he gets a solid answer to go. So if we can get an answer where the planning and the attorneys and us can meet and get 7 figured out one way or the other, and the other issue, which was the open space, if we can get those worked out, then we can go forward, or we can work on something else. So I don't know when that can get done. I'd love to have it happen in, a week, in 2 weeks. Not something that's out in 4 months. But I just know that once I get it done, we've gone, you start at the engineering, you get the date for him to work, and then you take it or you don't take it. If you don't take it, you go back to the end of his calendar, and then you jump back in again. So I'm gonna say it's gonna take him a month and a half from the time I notify him to go, that I get into his schedule and he does complete what's done. We've done about half the work so far. We've, he's got the computerized points for the plat plugged in. He's gonna have to do the legal descriptions for each of the lot. And the other thing about that, like I said, it's $25,000, I get a shell out. I don't wanna do that unless I know if 7 applies or not.
Well, thank you, Mr. Adams, that answers my question. So this is a 30-day cycle on the hearings examiner process, so that's 60 days, in terms of what we do here. Ms. Ruth, the question is still, preeminent here, and do you anticipate, what kind of timeline do you anticipate, as far as getting a definitive answer from the attorney, or is that the definitive answer? I mean, the question might be, you know, does it go to district court? I mean, help me out here.
Well, I think that, I can gain clarity from the city attorney within the next 10 days probably, for the 2 questions that I have. But it's that we all have to be on the same clarity is what our problem is right now. So I feel confident that I can get an answer from, or, you know, seek clarity from the attorney for that. But the timeline, you know, to come back before you with plans that are consistent with what the requirements of the application, the details for the landscaping and for the lot layout and configuration. Again, I think that it's fairly conservative to say that's a 2-month process, but at least it's somewhere to start.
Thank you, Ms. Ruth. Exactly, that gives us a place to start. So, with that, I would like to.
Mr. Hearing Examiner?
Yes, go ahead.
We could give the option of setting it for your next 30-day calendar and then just continue it as well, you know, if as a shorter period. That would allow them less delay if in fact we have the appropriate documents available soon.
And thank you very much. That's a good suggestion. And with that, I will close the hearing and make a decision here of sorts. And what I'd like to see happen, neither a motion for approval or denial, but a plea for clarity here. For case SUP 21-09, I would like to table this to the next available hearing date, 30 days from now, which would be April.
Yeah, so we've got April 26th.
We will put this on the April 26th agenda with the anticipation that we'd have 2 questions settled from staff and the city attorney. One being the so-called footnote 7 about the 10% allowance in this type of development, and the baseline requirements for landscaping, and get those issues settled and get clarity, get those resulting answers to the applicant so they can design a proper subdivision or development of this type. And we would expect a full set of drawings, perspectives, site plans, anything and everything that is typically done with this, and which we seem to be lacking. And if these questions, and I'm including all the questions expressed, by members of the public and staff and myself. And so I would, recommend, that we get the meeting minutes out as soon as possible and get them to the participants so we can all take a look at those questions and try to answer them and incorporate those kind of ideas that we expressed here tonight into the design for this project. And with that, I close this case and adjourn the hearing. And thank you all very much for your participation.
I do, and rather than the Zoom, we're now doing this, Dr. Noel was done with this last year. Okay, all I'm gonna say is,